We're back for episode 34 of the Auld Triangle. A little bit later than normal, but with Andy Stevenson going over there and getting married there and holding us up for quite some time, we had some congratulations, Andy. I'm only joking.
I'm a new man.
That's it. Yeah, it was great. A great trip, I'm sure, and congratulations. But look, scheduling over the last little while has been difficult. We had no guests this week like the last episode, but there's been lots going on, so we don't want to kind of brush over anything that's been happening in Irish mixed martial arts. We're blessed that we have lots to talk about again, and it's just the three of us. We're going to go through all the biggest news stories over the last couple of weeks, and we'll return to kind of normal kind of structure of the Auld Triangle. We'll be bringing guests on from the next episode on, but it is nice. I enjoyed it. We got a good reaction the last time, lads, when it was just the three of us shooting the shit. I don't think we're supposed to curse this early on YouTube, so sorry YouTube. But it's nice to come on and have a chat between the three of us as well about lots of stuff. We're going to cover, obviously, some of the biggest news. That Ian Garry has a fight. Shauna Bannon has been signed to the UFC. We had big fights for Moore, Richie Smullen. We had Clan Wars that took place. We're going to go through all that card. And upcoming, we have some fight news. Jar Harris is going out there, and obviously news about Cage Warriors and IÚR Fighting Championships, which is just a couple of days away. And let's get into it, lads. How are you keeping, first of all? Are we well? It's great to be back. It's great to be chatting to you again about the hectic world in Irish mixed martial arts. Are you keeping well? Obviously, Andy, you were away getting married and everything like that. I'm sure it was a wonderful experience.
It was fantastic. It was stressful, a lot of emotions, and then finally I could breathe again and enjoy the party. But yeah, it was over in Portugal for a few weeks. Back to reality now, back to work. I'm glad to be back here now. And Ian, thank you for slumming it. You were asking Dana White questions not too long ago, and now here you are stuck with us jabronis.
And not at all. I preferred having the chats with you, but yeah, no, it was great. Like, to get over there, and I knew, like, I had that question in my head. I even said it to you, like, if I got the opportunity to ask him, without a doubt. And it was so funny, like the way it's kind of structured in the media room is we were all kind of sit at our own places, and it's be the same for other shows as well, I'm sure, with Bellator. But to have microphones there, and basically you'll pick up the microphone to indicate that you want to ask a question. So then sometimes the UFC PR will come in and say, okay, you, and then point at me next, and it's coming. And I wasn't that nervous really until like the other person ahead of me finished asking the question, and I was just like, don't bundle the words. I had wished I could have named, like, the original plan was just, let's start fucking name dropping people here. Like, let's start mentioning Reese, and let's start mentioning Paul and Kaelin and Danny and everyone, like, outside. But then, you don't want to fucking piss them off either by asking too long of a question. So we got there. He said it was a good question. He gave me a great answer. And like, the time is now. I mean, that's what we've been talking about. I mean, we're preaching to the choir here, to ourselves and to anybody else that's listening. But, to be able to generate the question and the answer so that we can stick it out there and we can build some support. And I got a couple of nice messages from Reese and everybody like that to say fair play for bringing it up. But for me, it was, like, if I'm ever in a room with Dana White, and given the circumstances that we're dealing right now with Irish mixed martial arts, there was never in a month of Sundays that I was never going to ask that question. I couldn't wait to ask it, and I was excited to see his response. He didn't bite on the rumors, quote unquote rumors, of maybe booking an arena for late this year or early next year, but he wants to come back, and I thought he gave a pretty good answer, and I would expect that it would happen sooner rather than later, lads. I mean, steam is picking up now. We have Lee in the Ultimate Fighter. We have Shauna signing, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And, we have maybe a couple of fighters that could potentially go through the Contender Series in the next season or whenever. I don't know what's going to happen, but we need to get these fighters signed. We need an event back in Ireland. Now is the time. Like I said, Dana, I'm sure. What was your, like, maybe reaction to the response that he gave?
I tell you what, just a side note, as you're saying, for next year, I'd love to see it on Paddy's Day weekend in Dublin.
Oh, yes.
it falls on a Sunday, but do it on a Saturday, do it on the 16th. I feel like that'd be unbelievable. And it would really kind of be fitting for a return as well, especially with all the signings, potential signings you could have on a card like that.
Yeah, you could you could look at signing up a few, like, and we've seen UFC kind of pick up some talent as well to kind of structure cards in different areas of the world. Andy, would you be confident, Andy, in the UFC coming back for a show next year in 2024?
I've been quite negative on this for a while now, but I there is a growing confidence, especially now that we're seeing the likes of Shauna getting signed, Lee in the Ultimate Fighter, and I love that shout of a Paddy's Day card in Ireland. How great would that be? Obviously, they usually go to London for that weekend, but I mean, come on, like, they've had a lot of shows lately. We'll see how they get on. Maybe they want to take a little break just for a show, and then come on over back to Dublin. Additionally, obviously, as we'll talk about with Ian Garry later on, but he's booked. It gives him a little bit of time. Then after that, I mean, I suppose that's a decent chunk of time, actually, gone from August to March. So maybe he would even get another fight in after. Let's say he goes out here and wins. And anyway, we'll talk about that later on. But
no, it's the perfect segue. We'll talk Ian Garry first. We'll talk Shauna then after that. Let's talk Ian Garry. He's been announced for the Boston card, UFC 292 against Geoff Neal, the number 8 ranked welterweight in the world. Good fight, a good test. Andy, you were kind of talking about it, so I'll send it over to you just to share your thoughts on the fight itself and what it might mean for future opponents and future kind of fights for Ian Garry after that. Obviously, let's concentrate on the fight itself first. Geoff Neal, a tough challenge, but a winnable challenge based off his last performance.
Yeah, definitely. Like Geoff Neal, when Geoff Neal's on form, he's a serious handful. He's got immense power. He can put your lights out. We've seen him, even the fact that, Shavkat in his last fight, he lost that fight, but, Shavkat's a guy who's kind of been ragdolling people. And
Geoff Neal won the second round of that fight, arguably, I think, as well. He had some good moments there as well. So, like, I mean, Geoff Neal himself can prove that he can hang with the best in the division, also the up-and-comers. And, we have to give Geoff Neal credit as well, coming out from that Shavkat fight, and now you're fighting another killer in Ian Garry as well. I agree with what you're saying. It's a very good stylistic matchup, whereas that Geoff Neal has some very clean striking, but so does Ian Garry. So it's going to be who is more on point on the night. But, like, I feel like Ian Garry is not going to have to go in and worry about takedowns here, which is going to kind of complement his striking with a guy like Geoff Neal as well. But plus, you're going to have to be very, very careful. And that goes without saying when you're facing this level of competition inside the top 10 of the UFC division.
100%. I think Ian's a more skillful fighter. Like, skill for skill, I would place Ian Garry above Geoff Neal. But as you said, it's not always about skill. Sometimes it's about just getting cracked or cracking someone. But we've seen. I'm to be honest, I'm quite confident. Like, it's mad in a way, but also a really good sign that, like, we're talking about an Irish fighter going in against someone of the caliber of Geoff Neal. And I'm not really that nervous. Like, I'm not really. Sometimes I'm nervous for, like, we're impartial, but at the same time, you can't separate your emotions at times, and you get a bit nervous for Irish fighters. I don't have that right now. Now, that may change closer to the fight, but I'm actually very, very confident in Ian Garry's chances here against Geoff Neal, and I do think he'll go out and beat him. And I think it's a great matchup. It's that, like, incremental. There's not much room for movement once you're in the rankings, but it is that kind of, like, incremental next matchup for him while still pushing up the rankings.
Yeah, it is, like, really, and it just shows, Caoilte, how kind of fickle mixed martial arts is as a sport. And as you're watching, as the classic saying goes, you're only as good as your last fight, whereas we would have been a little bit apprehensive based off the fact that Ian Garry did get rocked in that Keenan Song fight. But then when you go out there and produce the level of performance that he produced against Daniel Rodriguez in his last fight, that kind of thought process completely gets flipped, where we've gone from that level of nervousness and uncertainty to that level of confidence based off what we've seen in his last fight, because he has to be given the highest credit possible for going out there and performing the best that we've seen him perform in the octagon against his toughest opponent on paper, a guy who had never been knocked out. And I think a lot of the confidence coming into just Geoff Neal fight, Caoilte, is coming based off that performance against Daniel Rodriguez in his last fight.
It's mental. If you said to me 2 fights ago that Ian Garry would be fighting Geoff Neal, I would have been saying I couldn't see. I'd be a bit nervous, as Andy was saying. I'd be a bit like, oh God, that might be a bit too soon. But now, after last performance and how he looked, I'm thinking I'm in the similar boat. I'm like, okay, this is actually a really good fight. And I think he could, it's a perfect stepping stone to kind of build himself up the rankings. In terms of the fight itself, though, I actually think stylistically fantastic, could end up being a really high level chess match in a striking department. But if you look at what he's doing at the moment over in Brazil and how he's in kind of engulfing himself in Brazil and the grappling aspect of things and improving that side of his game, it could be the perfect opportunity for him to actually like showcase that side of things, because we all know how good of a striker he is, and we know how high level he is there. The grappling yet to be seen at the level of, I guess, top 15 of the UFC, but this is a chance now where we could actually just see him come out and put all this experience in Brazil to use and go out and sub a guy. And I'd love to see it. I think it'd be really, really cool, and I'm really excited for it as a result.
That'd be a real cool, like, do you know when like John Jones used to go out and try and beat lads at their own game? Ian Garry will just start training around the world and picking up different pieces from different people. He's taken the head kick from Leon Edwards. Now he's gone to Brazil. He's going to learn from the greats of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and get a crazy sub. It's wild also that like it is kind of wild for us to be saying, oh, not really nervous when you think about Geoff Neal, like he's beat Bilal.
We're going to be nervous closer to the fight.
Yeah,
though.
we will.
Like,
like
100% the butterflies will be there.
And like finished, okay, he fought his teammate Gary's teammate Shafkat Rachmanov in his last fight and lost, but like he also went out and finished Vicente Luque the fight before that, beat Ponzinibbio, finished Mike Perry, finished Nico Price, beat Bilal Muhammad. Like that's a resume.
Yeah, it's like, look at, he called for Neil Magny, and he's kind of got, look at Geoff Neal's, he's not a big grappler per se in comparison to Neil Magny, but he's no slouch on the ground either. When you're maintaining the position in the welterweight rankings that he's managed to do over the last couple of years, I mean, that speaks for itself. I think in certain regards, this isn't, I think for the grappling, it's more so he'll be able to have it in his back pocket in this fight if things kind of get a little bit hairy during the fight. Whereas that I feel with Magny would have maybe pushed his grappling a little bit, where we might have had a chance to see Ian Garry's take. Like, we know Ian has great grappling. I think the last time we truly seen it was probably against Jack Grant in that title fight in Cage Warriors. And it's just the kind of stylistic matchups he's been in since haven't given him the opportunity to kind of showcase that again. And maybe this fight might be the same as well. That's why I liked the Magny match for him, because I felt Neil Magny would try and put the pressure on and try and put his back against the cage and, make it a kind of a grueling fight. Whereas I feel that what we're going to see with Ian Garry and Geoff Neal is a very technical, kind of tactical striking battle. And I think that'll suit Ian Garry quite a bit in him getting a win. But he'll have to be careful. He's been caught before, and he can't afford to be making those mistakes against guys like Geoff Neal, because I feel, as you're moving up the rankings in the UFC, you're going to get more punished for mistakes, which is understandable. I mean, very, very good. And we talked about what may come after the fact. I mean, Ian, maybe I'll go to you, Caoilte, real quick. Ian has spoken about, his 6-fight plan in getting to the top. But I mean, fights are going to start running out if he keeps beating these guys. If we're talking about Geoff Neal and getting a win over Geoff Neal, we could be talking maybe 1 or 2 fights before, and we're considering that he's going out there and going to win those fights. You're going to reach the highest level of that division pretty quickly if you stay going out and beating these guys, aren't you? How do you feel about his original plan for 6 fights? And you think, would that be a wise move to still develop his skill set and build himself slowly throughout those fights? This would be the second of 6 fights against Geoff Neal.
For a development point of view, I think it kind of makes sense, but I think it could end up 3 more fights, and it might not end up being the full 6. I think 3 more fights would be enough if he does win them all. But in saying that, money talks. If someone offers you a massive fight and a new contract, and that contract includes a big fight that starts you off, money talks. You're not going to be hanging on that 6 fights if you're getting a new contract and a big fight. You'd be jumping at the chance. That's what I think anyway. But regardless of whichever happens, he does have this plan. If he plans on sticking to it, fair play. And hopefully it works out. But with the hype that could garner around him over the next few fights, if he starts finishing lads or keeps finishing lads, then well, you're probably going to get thrown into the deep end a lot sooner than you may think.
It's been an enjoyable build as well. Like what do you think about like Tim? I think something that's quite I like it is the activity right now. Like this would be his third fight in the space like 5 months or something like that, and like he always gets compared. We don't compare him to Conor McGregor. Everyone else does outside of Ireland. But if you do think back to like when McGregor was at his peak, he was fighting frequently in the UFC, and he's doing that here. And like I think specifically this booking on the Boston card, which is UFC 292, a huge card, 2 title fights, and the fact that it's Boston, the fact that the Irish community there, Ian has been leaning a bit more into that, drumming up the Irish support, shouting out his compatriots who are rise up towards the UFC and into the UFC with him. And we're talking that, could there be a Dublin show? This is the type of stuff that you want. Like, I think this is a brilliant book. And what do you lads think?
No, a brilliant booking for sure. And I mean, I'm just hope that him winning this fight doesn't hinge on there being a UFC show. I think the how big a UFC Dublin show would be might depend on this result. I think UFC would want to bring Ian Garry back there, win or lose. Look at Ian won't like us talking about him losing, to be honest. But like, I mean, we have to mention it that way too. You never know what might happen in there. But like, we're all confident that he's going to get the win. A win over Geoff Neal, man, that sets up a serious main event for a UFC Dublin card against, I wouldn't say it'd be a top 5. I would be happy to see Ian Garry fight this level of opponent for the next 2 or 3 fights before going into the top 3. Give him a Wonder Boy after this. Like that. You know what I mean? Yeah, Wonder Boy is it's the perfect fight. And then you're talking about it being a stylistically maybe favourable fight for Ian Garry. Now that people might say, what the hell are you thinking, talking about wanting Ian Garry to go toe-to-toe with Wonder Boy? But, Wonder Boy comes towards Davy's career. Plus, it opens up the opportunity for Ian to utilise his grappling if things aren't going to plan in there as well. I feel like we've only seen a part of the amount of skill set that Ian Garry is bringing into the octagon, whereas that, he slowly but surely levelling up in between each fight. But he only has had the necessity to kind of showcase his abilities, where fighters fight to their level of competition and sometimes fighters fight down. But it seems that Ian Garry is fighting up to the level of his competition based off what we've seen against Daniel Rodriguez. And it'll be interesting to see what he does against Geoff Neal. And then, because all we're talking about nothing but serious tests. Like, we're into the business end of things here now when we're talking about Ian Garry's progression in the UFC. And we've gone past this hype train. Like, anyone's like, they're going to end the hype train. The hype train is fucking stopped because he's there. He is a legitimate prospect. And if he beats Geoff Neal, we're talking about him being in contendership in the welterweight division. And those are the facts. You know what I mean? You don't beat a guy like Geoff Neal and move into 8th spot where you're potentially taking on top 5 opponent next without being considered a legitimate contender in the title picture. And that in its own right is so exciting. As an Irish media member, as a fan of Irish mixed martial arts, and for the development and the growth of the sport in the country as well. I think it's very, very important. But it all hinges on performance and what he does in Boston, because it all means nothing until he gets in there. And I think, making the decision to go over to Brazil is a good one. Nobody can criticize any of the moves that Ian Garry has made so far in his career. Look at obviously, the split from Team KF was hard for us to take, where, you lost that little bit of magic in having an Irish fighter in an Irish gym progressing along the UFC. But the results that we've seen so far, it's very hard to argue about Ian moving away and getting looks at different gyms and upskilling in that kind of manner, where we would have like to compare with Conor McGregor, who fantastically done it without doing all of that. But for me, what I like to see in fighters is, going out there and getting different looks in different gyms and getting different spars. And that's what's going to really help develop your skill set and putting yourself in awkward and uncomfortable situations. And Garry seems to be ticking off all the boxes right now, and it's fantastic to see. Any final thoughts, lads, before we move on and talk about some other stuff?
No, just excited for, as excited as we are for this Geoff Neal matchup. There's even more exciting matchups to come when you keep looking up at that division. So it's very exciting time.
Another exciting matchup that we will be able to look forward to a little bit sooner than the Boston card is Shauna Bannon's debut for the UFC. That announcement was made in recent weeks. A very exciting announcement, and she will step into the strawweight division to take on Bruna Brazil, July 22nd. I was lucky enough to speak with Shauna. The interview is out on the YouTube channel right now if you haven't seen it, but she's ready. She's determined to go in there and stake her claim, and she's very, very excited for the next chapter of her career. I stated in the interview, I'm not surprised that she's been signed to the UFC. I always felt that she had the capabilities to be signed up. It wasn't a surprise, but I did admit the timing was surprising. There was talks of the Danny McCormick fight. There was talks of an Invicta Ireland show, and this kind of came out of the blue. But I think it's a good move overall. She was struggling to kind of find fights for herself, and she kind of stated in the interview with me that things weren't progressing in her career as quickly as she would have liked. Well, she's here. She's in the UFC now, and things are about to start progressing fairly rapidly. Caoilte, it's been fantastic achievement for her so early in her career to kind of get this signing in, and she's coming in against a tough opponent in Bruna Brazil. What's your overall opinion and thoughts on the signing itself?
On the sign itself, it came as a surprise to a lot of us, but perfect time for her, and it's fantastic. It adds this level of excitement, and this it gives you that boost of the potential of the UFC coming back to Dublin as well, and the next wave of Irish fighters coming through. That's the one thing it's really given me that buzz back. I think it's just so exciting, and the way that they can build her from here now is incredible. The opportunity to fight in London in front of a massive crowd that could all get behind her as well. Absolutely fantastic. And I think it's a bit of stroke of genius from the UFC in a sense. They see someone very marketable with an upcoming fighter with a good record, and they get them in early and they try and develop them into what they want to be. And that will hopefully be a title contender in the future.
Yeah, I spoke to her about the development of her skill set and how she would like to move up the rankings. And she is aware that, she needs to kind of fight the right fights at the right time. I think any fighter is like that, Andy, when coming in. But Bruna Brazil is a step up in competition from what Shauna has faced. She does realize that herself. But at the same time, Shauna Bannon goes in there and competes to the highest level of her abilities. It's a fight that is winnable. You're not going to go into the UFC and get any easy fights. So, that's about the size of it. How do you compare this matchup with Bruna Brazil? And do you like it? We'll talk about it maybe in more detail, but overall, it's a kind of a good kind of starting point for Shauna Bannon to see where she's at, and a good opponent, a tough opponent, but like I said, a beatable opponent at the same time.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment. I think that it's a tough matchup. But I think it's a winnable matchup, and I think that Shauna Bannon has come in here and she's taken her chance. That's what she's doing right now. This is someone who has kind of overcome adversity and exceeded I don't want to say exceed expectations. She's overcome adversity and continued to thrive throughout her career. Like if you think back to when she was fighting, I think she fought to a loss and was pregnant and didn't even realize she was pregnant while fighting, and then had this time off. And then that, we're only talking a couple of years ago, still an amateur. She had that amazing run in 2021. She went on to become a pro, fought obviously in Ireland a number of times, fought in Invicta, and she's backed herself every single step of the way. And I just feel like she is someone who will continue to do that. Like when an opportunity arises, she just kind of grabs it with two hands and snatches it. And I think that it could be a barn burner fight here against Bruna Brazil. I watched her fight the other day. I know she's obviously coming off a loss, and she was, some of the flaws in her game were maybe exposed in that loss. But the fight before that on the Contender Series, she looked very potent. She looked dangerous in all areas. And I think Shauna is similar. So I think it could make for a really, really interesting stylistic matchup. I think Shauna was 100% correct to take this. When UFC opportunity arises, go. And I'm not surprised either, because she's she's the total package. She's marketable. She fights well. She's got a fun style to watch. And look, yeah, it's a step up in competition, but of course it is. And I think she's ready for it.
Anyone who disagrees with her signing or trying to compare, like I had mentioned that to her in her interview, and she said like there was a little bit of negativity, mostly support for her. But like you're going to get that upper level of negativity when fighters join the UFC anyway, because more eyes on you and everything like that. But I think it's ridiculous to compare her career trajectory to someone like George Hardwick, who's gone through the Contender Series. It's not Shauna's fault that the UFC signed her straight up. Obviously, the UFC are looking at her as a very marketable fighter, a very skilled fighter as well. So I think anyone who is belittling or berating Shauna Bannon signing to the UFC needs to check themselves, to be honest, because why would you begrudge or why would you hate on another Irish fighter getting signed to the UFC? Because ultimately, that's only going to be to the benefit of Irish mixed martial arts, that we need fighters fighting on the big stages. Even with Bellator, we need Irish fighters fighting high up at Bellator and at PFL, and it's fantastic. And there's been a big barren spell in the UFC of Irish fighters for a few years where we've been crying out for it, and now we're on the cusp of it happening, and still people are wanting to complain. So I just can't get my head around that mentality. But
I didn't realize there was a lot of complaints, to be honest with you.
There's only a little, like a few on severe counts, just because the news came on the same day that Hardwick was signing for Contender Series, and people were saying that Hardwick should have went straight in, but it's nonsense.
Oh, so they're just kind of saying like, how is Shauna? Okay, gotcha.
Going straight in, or George would go through the Contender Series.
It's apples and oranges, like.
Yeah, exactly. Nonsense to me. But you're always going to have those.
I will say, I'd say. I don't know if she would want to fight now, but I'd say Danny McCormack's kind of thinking, what do I have to do here? I'm the champion.
That's the sad reality of the situation. She's left different out in the cold. Yeah, it's different, and Danny knows, she wants to be there as well. She deserves to be there too, in my opinion. But I mean, it's we've recorded podcasts, and the reality of the situation and what the UFC are looking for in signing athletes as well. It's a harsh reality. They're looking for kind of a profile fighter like Shauna coming in there, maybe more so younger in her career than Danny is as well. And that's the information that we've been getting from the horse's mouth ourselves. And that's the fact of the matter. I don't agree with it. And, hopefully it changes. Like, I think it'd be an absolute...
Just to clarify, so people don't misconstrue that, you're saying you don't agree with the UFC only looking for undefeated fighters rather than...
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I think, if you're... I think, becoming a world champion outside, and this is not just labelled on Shauna or Danny here. We're talking about Paul Hughes. We're talking about Rhys McKee. We're talking about Caoilte Loughran, where it was like, you go there and you win a world title in Cage Warriors or Invicta, you're almost guaranteed getting a shot at the UFC, and that's not the case. It's like a crying shame that Paul Hughes hasn't been signed up to the UFC right now. It's a crying shame that Rhys McKee hasn't been given a second shot again. And Caoilte Loughran, look, it can be he might be the next in line, given what we were saying, undefeated, finishing fights, and is highly active on social media. So it's just a crazy world.
Do you know what though? To look at it on the positive side, there's something happening. Like, we have Ian Garry now, we have Shauna Bannon in here now, we have Lee Hammond and Brad Katona fighting on Tough. So there's a bit of a movement starting to happen. So maybe this is what happens as you have spotlights starting to come to a scene again. Like when it was the first Irish wave, it's like, oh well, who's the other guy? Who's next? Is there a bit of momentum here that you could push? And then all of a sudden it starts to snowball, and maybe we could be sitting here in 6 months' time, and all these fighters, Danny McCormack, Rhys McKee, Paul Hughes, Caoilte Loughran, and on. I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm the most excited I've been in a long time. Like, the
announcement of a show would definitely accelerate that. But we're talking about sitting around for 6 or so months, and not to try and put a negative turn on it again. I don't like leaving these fighters in limbo at the same time too, because they have to earn a living off of this at the same time.
And the sad reality is they have to fight at some point. There's a call has to be made to say, right, how long do I wait before I go again? Because if you just keep on waiting and waiting and waiting, your call may never come.
Absolutely. But look, it is positive signs. We'll try and stick it. But look, it's trying to maybe explain the overall picture and what's happening right now. And look, it's good.
And
we need it to happen. We need a show. We need signings. And I'd be fairly confident that we are going to get a couple of signings within the next year in the UFC.
Just before we wrap up, because we got a little sidetracked there from the Shauna. I think it's really cool as well. One of the things that I really like is Paddy Houlihan was, a big part of his story. When I remember watching the Severe videos back in the day, was driving around Tala, showing that side of him, the kind of the family man, the Tala man, going fighting in the UFC, and now he has his protege who's also from Tala. It's a cool story of that community and that area where it's like the next generation. I think that's very cool, and it's going to be great to see both Shauna but also Paddy. We've watched them on the regional scene, the bond that they have and the way that they communicate when they're fighting. It's with like a lot of fighters and coaches, it's almost like they've got a video game controller at times, and they have that type of relationship. So looking forward to seeing Coach Paddy Houlihan, Team Ireland coach, have Paddy Houlihan in Octagon, but also in the UFC
as well. Yeah, as Chris Fields did tweet out, the first Irish coach to fight and coach a fighter in the UFC. So a phenomenal achievement, and really looking forward to seeing Shauna Bannon. Look, we're going to probably get a little bit more in depth on that fight a little bit closer to the time. We shall move on to a fight that did happen this past weekend, and that was Karl Moore, who picked up a fantastic win over Alex Polisi at Bellator 297 and stuck himself right into the title mix in Bellator. Caoilte, watching back that fight, how impressed were you with Karl? Very cool and composed. He looked in control all of that fight, never looked in bother at all. Given the circumstances and a lot of the hype coming in and what he was going to face and the consequences after the fight and being right into contention now, it was really good performance by Karl Moore overall. And
not to mention the fact the performance was so good given, I guess, what happened on the night as well, because for those who don't know, the Richie Smullen and Karl Moore's fights had to be moved to the post limbs of Bellator. I think it was due to an ambulance issue that happened in Chicago. So like having to deal with that as well, I'd say that was very frustrating, and to go out there and still perform to the highest level is really impressive. And the way he did it, I was taken aback by. It was a really fluid performance. For the first round, for example, he was landing that left hand like all day as much as he wanted. It was he looked so good. I was thinking, this guy looks, he really looked like a title contender the way he looked in those. Throughout the entire fight, even in the last round. I know he dropped the last round, but he still looked good, and he was still putting up. He was winning. Well, he was winning the fight, but last round, it wasn't exactly going his way, but he was still doing fantastic. Thought throughout he was giving Polisi a very hard time. He made Polisi look tiny as well. I couldn't believe it. He's a huge light heavyweight, as Karl, and really so composed throughout the entire fight. And delighted to get the win, and hopefully maybe one more in Dublin, then he gets the title shot.
Yeah, either that, I called for a title shot. Mike got a bit excited straight after the fight, but either that or Yoel Romero fight in Dublin would be class. But I think to go back, Andy, to the fight itself, I mean, Karl's striking was on point. His takedown defense was on point. Lost out on a couple of scrambles. Maybe, it was a grueling fight when he was getting a little bit tired, probably ended up in bottom and a lot longer than he would have liked to in stages, but still remained calm and composed and didn't take any damage in those positions whatsoever. And really fantastic performance from Karl. And maybe just share your thoughts on the fight and what you'd like to see next for him.
I'm assuming that was directed to me because I have been not in this chat now for a second because my Wi-Fi dropped. So I'm just going to carry
there you
on.
Go. And you know what? It was perfect timing as well. You didn't.
So I should have said fucking nothing. I was very, very impressed with Karl Moore, though. I thought, as Caoilte mentioned, that first round, his distance and throughout the fight, his distance management was fantastic. I thought that his striking looked very crisp. I thought it looked improved on previous fights. He was at one point he doubled up on the jab and landed a huge left left hand, fighting at the southpaw stance, looked great. Similarly, in the second round, I thought that, where Palisi was having his success was in the kicking range, and Moore just got right in his face, said, "Nah, we're going to box, and I'm going to poke the head off you," essentially here. Now, Palisi did have some success getting the takedowns. I thought that Karl slowed a little bit as the fight went on, but that's kind of natural as you're grappling a lot more. I thought he landed some nice sweeps, and I'd say he took the first rounds clearly. I know Josh Thompson was, Big John put him on the spot and said, "Who in that second?" He's like, "Oh yeah, Palisi." Don't listen to that. Yeah, Karl Moore clearly won the second. I thought Palisi maybe edged the third. Not a whole lot of damage happened in the third, but I thought it was a clear cut win for Karl Moore. Another 15 minutes under the belt, and fighting an opponent ranked ahead of him. It's on to the next one. I think it's a big fight. If Karl Moore is healthy, if he's ready to go again, get him on that Dublin card, a big spot in a big fight. I've seen some people call for title fight. I don't think it necessarily has to be the title fight, but I certainly wouldn't begrudge him with that. And I think it should be a big fight next for Karl Moore in a prominent spot, and stick it on the Dublin card.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything that you said, and just maybe kind of reiterate what Caoilte said at the start. To be able to go out there and perform like that, when you're getting mentally ready to fight, and we've seen Karl get his hands wrapped. He had to get his hands wrapped twice in the one night. You're trying to get yourself mentally prepared, and then you're getting into a certain mindset. Then being told you're not fighting for another 5 or 6 hours. Everything is structured towards you peaking at a particular time in a fight camp, and I think that needs to be spoken about how messed up the situation was in the position that Bellator put these fighters in. Like Sean said it on the big podcast, why are you putting 2 ranked heavy or light heavyweight fighters in the post limbs and keeping 2 unranked guys? It that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, a little bit more forgivable in Richie Smullen's case, but Richie Smullen was still fighting for a spot against Kizriev to get into the rankings too, so it didn't make all that much sense. And I mean, yeah, it's just Bellator being Bellator, really, ain't it? And it's frustrating to kind of see. And although the original problem was beyond their control, decisions need to be made to benefit fighters that are fighting for really, really high stakes. And we're talking about an Alex Palisi and a Karl Moore who are fighting to put themselves into title contention. Credit to both.
Palisi was a hometown fighter too.
He is, he's based stateside. I don't know if he's a Chicago guy, but I think he trains out of some training out of Extreme Couture, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, he's like an American-based fighter, I guess, as well. So I'm not sure if Chicago is home for him.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, not so far. Not too far away, I guess. So, look, let's talk about Richie Smullen. Obviously, didn't have the same kind of outcome as he would have hoped in there against Timur Kizriev. We spoke, Caoilte, on the podcast about how high quality of an opponent is for Kizriev, and how great it was for Richie Smullen to get that chance to fight on American soil as well. And he went out there, Richie did, Caoilte, and fought a very tough fight. I think he kind of maybe started a lot slower than he would have liked. Maybe the change in time of fight as well might not have suited him. Different people will deal with that circumstance in different ways. But I felt that Richie kind of grew into the fight as the fight was going on. But towards the end, then it was a little bit too little too late for him in the end.
I'll tell you what, there's not many people that are as tough as Richie Smullen. So the one thing I took away from that fight, he just does not stop. If there was no time limit on that, I'd say he would have went all night and he probably would have got the win. It was absolutely mental. Hats off to him. He put on some performance against a really unorthodox opponent like Timur Kizriev. He's not your typical Dagestani, is he? He does have that wrestling side to him, don't get me wrong. He likes to get you down, but he's got this kind of unpredictable striking at times, and he throws some really unorthodox shots. Like in that early round, Kizriev was really loving that uppercut, and I was a bit surprised by it, but Richie ate them and grew in it. Yeah, it's part of the slow start to the fight, but as he grew into it, he started landing his own shots, and in the final round, I was gaining a lot of hope. I thought, okay, maybe it could, as it was too late, I guess, but he was looking good. He was landing some nice shots. He landed that left hook a few times. Straight. He was catching Kisriev, and he looked like he belonged there. That's the big thing there. And I feel like it was a really good fight for him, and it could. It's only, despite the loss, it'll do him a lot of good in Bellator's books for putting on such an entertaining fight, and could hopefully get him a main card spot in Dublin.
Yeah, very well said. He looked like he belonged there, and I would hope, Andy, that Bellator will keep him in positions like this, and give him the fights that he deserves against ranked opposition. I scored the last round for him. Obviously, the work had happened and the work that Kisriev had did before round 3 was enough for him to kind of maybe secure the win. But like, he must have been thinking, what do I have to do here? Because Richie never stopped moving forward, never stopped throwing shots, never stopped trying for the takedown. I mean, that's maybe something Richie can look at himself, whereas that he had the ability in previous fights, to be able to rely on that takedown. Obviously, that wasn't there, so he had to kind of think a little bit more outside the box and kind of trade a little bit more with Kisriev. And Richie will be back. He'll be more than willing to take on these opportunities again. And I guess I just hope that Bellator will reward him with some more of these fights down the line. Let's put him in there maybe with another ranked guy in Dublin and see how he does. I think Richie deserves it. I think he's capable of these challenges, and he's not going to be able to grow into the fighter he can be without facing these challenges each and every fight as well.
Yeah, I'd like to see him get another crack at a ranked opponent. Whether they will, I don't have a whole lot of faith, and that's nothing to do with Richie and everything to do with my faith in Bellator. Yeah, look, I think it was a rough night at the office for him. At the end of the day, I thought it was 30-27 for Kisriev. I just thought that Kisriev was he had the tie-in on Richie. Every time Richie kind of stepped in to throw one of his shots, at least in the first 2 rounds, Kisriev would kind of hit him with a 2-punch combo, and he just seemed to have the beating of Richie for the large majority of the fight. But as you said, Richie kept coming forward. Like Richie's a fighter I really admire. He's just a very strong work ethic. He's the hardest worker in the gym, and that's not coming from me. That's coming from hearing from all the teammates in SBG. As Caoilte said, like Richie spoke to me before about Kieran Clark and saying he's as tough as an old boot, and you could say that exactly about Richie. John McCarthy saying he's the guy in the bar where you crack him with a bar stool and he just gets right back up and he's in your face. And yeah, like I thought he was losing the vast majority of that fight, but he was never out of it. And I think there's something to that, and I think there's a lot to work on. Clearly, after that, I thought Kisriev did a great job of kind of stepping off the center line as well and landing his shots. And look, round 3 I thought was Richie's best round, but it just wasn't enough on that night. And I thought he lost fair and square. But as I said, hopefully it's something to build on, something to work on, and that look. A lot of time for Richie. That's just my honest assessment of how I saw it. But yeah, no, I definitely thought it was a comprehensive loss. But hopefully there's more happier and more celebratory nights for himself in the gym moving forward.
Yes, indeed. Let's move a little bit.
Before we move on, can we just give a bit of credit to those Irish lads in Chicago? That with Karl Moore afterwards. You could hear him throughout the fight with the ole 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 wearing their Cork jerseys. I saw a cheeky Limerick jersey in there as well. I absolutely love it. I don't know how they got past security to get back there, but I hope they were probably escorted back there to meet them. But unreal. Fair play to the lads.
Fair play, yeah. Legends. Let's move a little bit closer to home, lads. Obviously, we had Clan Wars 47, which went down on the 11th of June, a little bit back. We're going to kind of a little bit of a chat. Obviously, we've seen pro fights and wins for Dara Kelly. Matthias Sahov's Jordan Fury won his pro debut as well. And we had a couple of other fights as well that we're going to break down. Now, let's start at the main event. I'll go to you first, Will. Dara Kelly went on and beat Andre Ferreira by KO in the second round at 28 seconds. How would you assess this performance? Obviously, it's great that Dara got that breakaway from.
It was a Darce. It was a sub.
Oh, it was a Darce. It was down in Tapology here as a KO, TKO. So.
Oh, I don't mind those Tapology lads.
Those Tapology lads.
Get it from the true source, the Auld Triangle.
How did I mess that one up?
Oh, Caoilte.
Oh, that's you, Caoilte.
Oh,
For
Jesus.
fuck's sake.
Come on now, Caoilte.
I'm fucking changing it now.
Right,
Jeez,
fire him.
What is
no
that, lad?
use.
What's that, lad?
Oh, jeez.
Mate, were you even watching the event?
Caoilte.
I say,
First
must
of
have
all,
done it
before
at 2
your
o'clock in the morning. So.
before your comments on the fight, talk to us about that colossal fuck up on Tapology.
There's no coming back from that one, lads.
There's KO. There's KO.
There's KO, yeah.
P45's incoming, lads. Jeez. What? Well, what a KO. Sorry.
Compose yourself. Compose yourself, Caoilte.
Fuck's sake. Look, I tell you what, that lad Fahir, he came out and he put on a lot better performance than I expected. And he asked some questions as well, and really put up a good fight. And I thought he tested Dara quite a bit, and Dara was phenomenal as always. Looked huge as per usual. He's massive for lightweight. Never mind, massive for lightweight. Never mind featherweight, which he also fights at. But striking looked good. Some really nice shots. Grappling looked really good. He, I think it was that double leg he was going for it, and it was just there for him all the way when he got it. And then in the second round, I think he got a bit cut as well. He got a small little cut on him as well, did Dara. But second round then came out, got him down. Did he get him down? Yeah, he got him down, and then got in that Darcy. Your man did look hurt according to the commentary, and maybe a little bit, but Dara was dominant and a really impressive performance. I think it lines him up perfectly for that Bellator Dublin card, and it's just another win to the record, and some very good experience and some good looks against a decent opponent, but not a decent record. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, you got a couple of tests in that fight, Andy, and you know you need to compete, and you know, fair play to Dara. He wants to be active. He wants to get out and onto these cards. Picked up a nice star stroke, not a knockout, Caoilte, and and no, you have to be impressed with the performance, and it's another notch on the belt. It's another win for his record, and like Caoilte said, it sets him up for a potential Bellator fight in September as well.
Yeah, I kind of saw this fight coming in as chewing gum, if that makes sense. You know, you've got a meal later on, Bellator Dublin's coming up, and you just kind of want to, you know, quench the appetite, and going in against a 2-4 guy, I was expecting Dara to kind of go in and just smoke him from the bell. Now, as Caoilte mentioned, to be fair, Ferreira came to bang from the start. Like, he came out, started really quick. I think that like Phil Campbell at one point in the first round was saying that he thought Kelly was kind of, you know, committing a little bit too much in his shots, and that's kind of what I saw too. I think Dara was kind of out there looking for the finishes, how it looked to me from the very, very start, and he was kind of overextending a little bit. When he kind of slowed it down, I was like, hang on, let me just be smart and fight and just beat this lad. He took over. So Ferreira put up a decent fight. There was, you know, they were exchanging against the cage, and Kelly came down a few times, and really the second round was the performance I was expecting. I feel like he probably composed himself on the stool and was like, right, hang on, let me just go out here and take care of business. And he literally went out, shot a beautiful double leg with a trip, got him down, got the bars almost immediately, and got the tap, and that was all she wrote. So you know, an efficient, while it went into the second round, once he kind of found his composure, a very efficient performance, and more cage time. If you're not getting the fights on Bellator, if you're not getting the activity that you want, it's great that he was able to fight here again. You know, he's going to fight stiff competition in Bellator, I would assume, and on to the next one.
Absolutely, on to the next one, as I struggle with my unmute button there. And the next one is Matthias Zarovs, who went out there and defeated Ryan Taylor and Caoilte. I mean, there's not too much to discuss here, I think, and we were expecting this to be kind of a little bit of a walk in the park for Zarovs, and he went out there and got the TKO within 14 seconds, and you know, probably not too many lessons will be learned based off that fight.
No, not at all. Look, it's not Zaharov's fault at all. You know, he was lined up to fight a very tough opponent in Dara Tuman, and one I hope that's booked again, because what a fucking fight that is. I'd love to see it rebooked. But he fought, it was given to him, and on such late notice, they brought in Ryan Taylor. He's UK based. He's one of these fighters they bring in on late notice, very common. he's not exactly very good. You can tell from watching, and then 14 seconds, Matisse got the head knee clean, and that was it. And expect nothing less. But look, he's coming off the back of, I think it's 2 losses, Matisse. So it's a big, it's good way for him to gain a bit of confidence, get the win back, and onwards to the next one. So I'm not sure what's next. Maybe Clan Wars. I'd like to see him in Octagon, actually, if he's no longer with Brave or any of them. But
good shot.
yeah, I think he'd be a very good signing for them, and they'd be very marketable for them as well. So hopefully something like that next.
Yeah, good shout. Jordan Fury, Andy, went in there for his pro debut. He talked to us at the time when he didn't have an opponent on the Auld Triangle. He took on Gabriel Da Silva, who's also making his pro debut. And yeah, it was business as usual for Jordan, moving over from amateur ranks to professional ranks. He went out there and handled business relatively impressively, didn't he?
Yeah, I thought he looked very pumped. I mean, one of the first shots he landed was a huge shot that kind of snapped his opponent's head back like a Pez dispenser. Like it was very theatrical. And then he proceeded. There was a low blow off a body kick.
What's the Pez dispenser?
You're having a laugh.
Oh, come on, Ian, now.
There's a full documentary about this on Netflix.
Where like you press the button and it pops the head back and then the sweet comes out the thing.
Oh yeah,
little things.
Yeah, I do know. No, so apologies. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Jeez, that's almost worse than the sub KO controversy of 10 minutes ago.
I just need to. Maybe I'm away. Well, I was going to say I'm away from Ireland too long in my defence, but there's fucking Pez dispensers. Hey, that's it. We hit the fucking. That we had. Go. Right, we're not like Andy Stevenson as a young lad walking around with 2 Pez dispensers with all the sweets in his mouth.
My butler would get my Pez dispensers.
Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
But no, he landed a lovely shot. He got caught with a low blow off a body kick. And then he proceeded to go right back to work, landed a big left hand, and then ended up, I kind of knew pretty quickly once this fight started, I was like, this Da Silva lad is in for a bit of a rough night here. But thankfully it didn't last too long for him. He ended up getting dropped with a jab, which kind of speaks to the power that the Fury possesses in his hand. So yeah, he got dropped with a jab and got the TKO. So a very efficient, clinical win by Jordan Fury. Looked far superior than his opponent, to be honest, and he put as long as it went, he put a beating on him. So a successful debut, and on to the next one.
Yeah, on to the next one it is. I'll stick with you, Andy. Damien McKenna went out there and picked up another good win as well for the vacant featherweight title as well. What was your thoughts on that performance?
I thought it was a great fight. So maybe not to talk specifically about McKenna's performance, but I thought it was a brilliant fight between McKenna and Mullen. Very evenly matched. McKenna's boxing is very, very crisp. We've seen him before at one of the IMMAFs, I think last year, maybe the year before, when he went out and had a ferocious knockout. I remember that was kind of the first time I'd really taken note of him, and he looked very good here tonight as well. Close fight. I thought the rounds 1 and 3 were very close. I gave the first one, I edged that one to McKenna. The second one, I thought that was probably maybe the clearest round, and that was for McKenna. And I thought that Mullen won the last one. But yeah, they were exchanged on the feed. Mullen looked good with his kicks. I thought once it was in boxing range, McKenna was landing the crisper shots. They were exchanged on the ground for a while as well. And yeah, an evenly matched fight. I thought, and to be honest, I was impressed with both of them. But yeah, I thought that was good matchmaking from Clan Wars. I thought the right guy got the win, and I'm looking forward to seeing both of them fight again. Indeed,
a pretty active night when it comes to finishes and stuff. We had a wide range of KOs, a couple of submissions as well. Maybe the next two on Billy Sutherland picked up a 55-second first round knockout, and before that, Darragh O'Sullivan picked up an 8-second knockout. So 2 relatively quick knockouts there, Caoilte. Was there anything, including those fights, maybe that stood out to you for the rest of the card, or any standout performances?
Yeah, there's 2 in particular, actually. So that Jamie McGaugherty, he got a 13-second knockout. It was I was only telling you guys earlier, it was mental. He came out and the first thing he did was like throwing like a jumping head kick. I was like, who was this fella? And then finishes him 10 seconds later. It was yeah, look, not much to say about that fight. It was so quick, but that was really impressive. But someone who did kind of have a little bit longer in there, but not so much. 1 minute 36 seconds was Nathan Chambers. Really impressive grappling, I must admit. Now him and he fought Jess Paulo's brother, Jed Paulo. So that was a featherweight fight. Nathan looked really good. It was non-stop grappling from the off. He's an active grappler. He was really, really good. Didn't make a single mistake, it seems. And got the back and worked his way up, flattened his opponent out, and got the sub. It was great win for him, and I was really impressed. It was only his debut. I think he fights out of SVG Drogheda. So one to keep an eye on. Really impressive.
The Irish Taco. That's some nickname, wasn't it?
That's class, isn't it? Ireland has the best nicknames. The one
I feel like Ireland has shy tacos though. So
best one I heard was it Spice Bag. Is a card and has Spice Bag as his nickname.
Yeah, that's a great nickname. It's a great nickname. Maybe we'll have
there was loads of great. This is an entertaining card, especially on the amateur. So there were loads of finishes. The one you mentioned there on the Billy Sutherland one, that was he got this takedown on Conor McGoyle, who we saw fighting at the Nationals recently. He kind of almost caught a kick and shook up. It was like he basically it wasn't a takedown. He kind of threw him to the ground, and as he got back up, just landed the cleanest right hand, and just send him right back to the ground. There was the Darragh O'Sullivan knockout was fairly ferocious as well. Which was the Saul Boyle versus Patrick McIlharney. He caught him with a shot, dropped into a knee. There was loads and loads of finishes here. I was really impressed with Jack Newman. Also, he looks quite the kickboxer. And he got a second round TKO. And someone else, I'm just going to go on a ramble here. Someone else who I was also impressed with. Now, she was fighting an inexperienced opponent. I think it was Gemma Brown's first ever MMA fight. But we've seen Sarah Elliott Sharon a number of times now fighting, and she's trying to trade wins and losses, and still obviously very young, still an amateur. But I thought she looked very composed in this fight. Where previously maybe we may have seen her panic or things like that. I thought she fought very smart, high fight IQ, and just did what she needed to do. Brown was kind of the longer fighter, was having a little bit of success on the feet with the kicks, and immediately closed the distance, got in her face, took her down, and got the win, which is I was impressed. Thought I saw some improvements there.
Very well said. Yeah, I would agree with all of what you said as well, and Caoilte. And that was kind of a look back, another successful Clan Wars show. Fair play to them, a good card, very entertaining too. That's still available on pay-per-view if anyone wants to go back and look at that or purchase it. I mean, you're going to get lots of finishes there, lots of exciting fights. So fair play to Clan Wars. And maybe while we're on this topic of looking at fights, guys, we'll look ahead maybe to IÚR Fighting Championship 7, which is taking place this coming weekend. It has a couple of interesting fights throughout. Alexander Yankov versus Claudio Pastella. For the pro lightweight title, we have a pro flyweight type between Mickey Pereira and Moriar Georgie. We have a featherweight title at amateur between Kevin Keoghan Tiernan Loughran. Georgi Groziev is taking on Elvis Luko for the bantamweight title. Paul Buckley is taking on Shea Leatham for the welterweight title. And Aaron Boyle is taking on Jake Gilpin for the lightweight title. Lots and lots of mouthwatering fights there, Caoilte. What ones are sticking out to you? You could name any one of these ones, I guess. Decky always does a great job. He's been on with us before in putting together these cards. Loves matchmaking and matchmakes very, very good fights anytime these cards are going on. So what are you looking forward to most seeing there on IÚR Fighting Championships this weekend?
Main event, to be honest. It's main event for a reason. I think Alexander Yankov has just looked so good in his last two fights in particular. Even go go back to the Scott Harvey fight. He looked really good in that as well. But he's really come out in the last two and impressed me. And I think this is kind of a new bit of a step up again against this Claudio Pastella. And we get another Ireland versus Italy fight, which is what I love now, I must admit. They seem to be common in recent times. So a great one as well for the belt. I think it's the first one for IÚR Fighting Championships. The first professional belt on the line. So a big card overall. Outside that, I think the amateur one that I'm looking forward to the most has to be Tiernan Loughran and Kevin Keogh. Great to see Tiernan back in there. And massive opportunity for Kevin Keogh as well, who's stepping in, replacing Rory Lavery to pull out.
Yeah, indeed. Like, I mean, I was looking at the fight between Paul Buckley and Shea Leatham for the welterweight title as one that sticks out to me. I think, you know, Shea is always has that forward pressure, very aggressive fighter. And I'm sure Paul will have to do the same here. These two guys, I'm looking forward to seeing that one as well. Obviously, Tiernan Loughran against Kevin Keogh. Tiernan coming off of his loss with Max Daly. Obviously, will have a point to prove coming in here as well. Has a tough fight ahead of him in Kevin Keogh. It'll be interesting to see how he gets on. Anything that's sticking out to you, Andy, on this card? Anyone that you're looking forward to seeing, or any good matchups that you're excited to watch?
Yeah, I'm actually really looking forward. One, as you were going through the list there, it was the George Groza versus Elvis Luco one. Elvis Luco was on quite the tear last year. Obviously, he ran into Ronan Deegan and lost that fight. And George Groza has looked like he's been improving, and he's looked great. I think he's won a couple of titles as well as Elvis Luco. I think that is a brilliant matchup, to be honest with you. I think it's a title-worthy matchup as well. And I think they're going to match up very interestingly. And yeah, the main event, Alexander Yankov, like he's kind of, you know, again, traded wins and losses. He's someone who I could see potentially breaking out and making that next step from, you know, the regional shows onto like a Cage Warriors or something like that. And Claudio Pacella, I don't know how to pronounce it, one of SBG Ireland's 700 Italians. They seem to have an ever-growing stable of Italian fighters in SBG. I don't know much about him, to be honest with you. So I'm interested to see him. But yeah, like as always, and you know, we Dara Ward, I feel like I've seen him. Sorry, am I getting mixed up now? I was about to say he just fought. That was Darragh Sullivan. But Dino Driscoll, we've seen Dino Driscoll fight. He had a phenomenal performance a couple of months ago, fighting out of SBG Nace. Very much looking forward to seeing him back in there. So, look, there's a whole heap of stuff. I see there's a Stanka on there, Vladimir Stanka versus Jack Thorne. Anytime I see one of the Stanka brothers fighting, sign me up. They have the wildest styles, mad haircuts, and I'm interested.
Yep, absolutely fantastic fights there in our fighting championships. Looking forward to kind of taking a look at those this weekend. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping before we wrap it up here, guys. Obviously we had the announcement today as we're recording. Cage Warriors will be coming back a little bit sooner than expected to Dublin. They're going to the RDS, Andy Stevenson's neck of the woods,
the south side.
He's delighted to see that. What's your thoughts on the move of
fuck the north side? Sorry, who's a Caoilte? But yeah, that's not very nice, Caoilte.
Shocking, carry on.
Sorry, you got carried away there. What were we saying?
Real quickly before, like, we're running out of time here a little bit, but if you were to match up someone for the main event of that Dublin card, Andy, off the top of your head, given all circumstances right now, let's say that no one has been signed to the UFC in October, which might be a little bit stretched beyond. Who would you like to see? Who do you think is deserving of that main event slot in the Dublin show?
I mean, if we're saying nobody has been signed and all fighters are on the table who are with Cage Warriors, I think it's got to be Paul Hughes. I think you put Paul Hughes in the main event. Against two, I don't know. Don't want to see it. Still, I'll still. The longer this goes on, it's harder to do. But I'm like, no, straight into the UFC. So hope I'm wrong. Hope that doesn't happen. But that would be for me the logical choice. There's a load of choices. You could have Paul, you could have Reese, and you could have even Caolan. But I think Paul.
Yeah, that's fair to say. And look, we'll speculate about that card a little bit more. Interesting that they have moved it forward. It's now on October 14th, I believe. Just pulling that straight out of the air there. 14th or 15th, I believe. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. On the 14th.
And then just sticking with Cage Warriors news real quick, Leon Hill has been announced to take on Dimitriu Gurlean over in.
Oh yeah,
that's that is a fantastic fight, guys. Cage Warriors 158. He's heading over there to try and do the Italian job again, another Irish takeover in Italy, perhaps. But I mean, based off Gurlean's fight against Adam Cullen and Leon's recent resurgence, man, this is an absolute scrap. Any thoughts on this, Caoilte?
Unbelievable. Another great scrap and great booking for Cage Warriors. It's great to see Leon active as well. You know, it's that his activity rate recently is unbelievable. Like he could really climb the rankings of Cage Warriors and put himself into title contention, especially with all these all the fighters going elsewhere at the moment or potentially going elsewhere. Could open up an opportunity for him to skip the queue and get up there as soon as he can.
I think it's a good step up in competition at this stage of his career, Andy, against a good, tough opponent on enemy ground. You know, you're ticking off a lot of boxes and getting some good experience and with this matchup alone. I'm excited to watch it. I'm sure you are as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a brilliant booking by Ian Dean, and I think it's got violence written all over it. We saw what Gerlian did with Adam Cullen, who was, geez, I had Adam Cullen on such a pedestal going into that fight, and I still think he's a great fighter, and to go in and do that and to finish him the way he did in a violent fashion, and we've seen Leon Hill just look absolutely ferocious. Some brutal finishes on the Irish scene, and also getting the finish over Team Tarz's Marcin Zambala. I think this is one that's got a finish written all over it.
Yeah, just before we wrap up too, we must say that Ger Harris has been announced for his fight against Cody Matthews. That's taken place at APFC, which is a Virginia-based promotion stateside. That's a flyweight contest that takes place on Sunday, July 16th. Obviously, we'll talk about that a little bit closer to the fight. Obviously, we have Andreas Binder that's fighting next month as well. Things are picked always at a hot and high level at Irish Mixed Martial Arts. Anything else, guys, that we need to discuss? Oh, obviously, yeah. Let's talk about just to finish up with Will Fleury. It has been announced that the latest Nevada State Athletic Commission that he has picked up a 9-month suspension for the use of banned substances. His fight with Krzysztof Jotko has been now placed as a no contest. Obviously, Jotko also tested positive there, along with another 8-9 PFL fighters in that category, and that whole light heavyweight tournament has kind of been tossed on its head. So now we know Will Fleury's fate. After this, we don't know what's happening. Everything is still up in the air with Will. As it stands right now, we've heard no word. He's still a PFL fighter. It's a 9-month suspension, which is set to end on January 1st, I believe, next year. Still up in the air whether he'll fight for PFL again. So a lot of unknowns, but what we do know, it was a 9-month suspension. So we will not probably see him fighting for the PFL, but we definitely won't see him fighting for the PFL for the next 9 months. And it's still to figure out how
it's
far
this situation.
Yeah, it's to figure out how far the suspension goes and whether he can fight in other organizations. All of that is up in the air. We'll tell you.
It'd be interesting to see what PFL do, because there's so many of them that have popped. And
that's it. Yeah,
it's so weird. It's not just one person on the card popping. There's 10 of them, and then both Will and his opponent popping. It's madness.
And half of the rest of the light heavyweight bracket as well. So it's a real mess over there at PFL. What started as a very promising, exciting year for PFL, it turned into a little bit of a nightmare given the circumstances. But look, we'll see what happens in that scenario. And we'll keep you updated when we know more about that. Everything is that was only announced yesterday, so everything is still right up in the air as well. And that about wraps us up, guys. Episode 34, a little bit of a quick blast, a little bit of a chit chat between the lads there. So thanks for joining us. If you like what you hear, make sure and hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, give us a 5-star review on Spotify, on SoundCloud.
Share it out, lads. If you like it, be like, this is a nice podcast that I like to listen to, and you should listen to it too.
There you go. And tag us as well, so we can share. That's the radio voice, Andy, is it?
It's sponsored by Go Loud on the Go Loud app.
Shout out to Capture Athletics with the jerseys here. Fantastic. Love them. Auld Triangle tops as modeled by me and Caoilte. Andy will have his on hopefully down the line. And
I'm sporting a one bone because Capture Athletics don't pay me shit.
Love it. Any final thoughts, Andy, before we send it over to Caoilte to send us on our way?
No, it's just good to be back. I feel a new man. I'm a married man now. Life
Does it
is
feel different, Andy?
oh, so different, so different. I can't tell you how different it is because I don't feel a difference at all. But no, good to be back. Exciting times for Irish MMA. I'm excited. I haven't been in the throes of MMA for the last while because I've been focused on planning a wedding, and now I feel like I've missed a load of news. Came back. There's a shitload of stuff going on. Irish MMA is booming. The Auld Triangle is booming, and it's all going up from here, lads. It's all going up.
Yeah, that's very well said. Caoilte, see you out.
Can I relive? I was long before.